morning, everybody. I'm Liz Kirkwood, Executive Director of FLOW, a Great Lakes Public Policy and Educational Center. We, the Oil and Water Don't Mix campaign, are here today as representatives of more than a dozen environmental groups, businesses, tribes, and communities, and thousands of citizens who are calling on the Snyder administration to take charge now and protect the Great Lakes from a catastrophic oil spill. Two 61-year-old pipelines known as Line 5 running through the Straits of Mackinac put our waters, our economy, and our pure Michigan way of life at tremendous risk. These pipelines were built by Enbridge in 1953 in state waters in state-owned bottomlands subject to a state easement held in public trust. As owner and trustee, the state has an ongoing, perpetual duty to the public to protect the Great Lakes from harm and preserve the public's right to use the water for drinking, fishing, swimming, boating, commercial navigation, recreation, and other uses. Since 1999, Line 5 owner Enbridge has been responsible for more than 1,000 pipeline oil spills in North America, including the worst inland oil pipeline spill in U.S. history, the 1 million gallons of heavy tar sands oil that gushed into our own Kalamazoo River in 2010. This disaster was a wake-up call for Michigan. Our leaders should make sure that it does not happen again, especially in the heart of the Great Lakes. Michigan is long overdue in applying state public trust law, specifically the Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act, to the aging Enbridge pipelines in the Straits of Mackinac. In July, 17 organizations of the Oil and Water Don't Mix campaign that represent some 200,000 Michigan citizens made that request in a letter to the governor. The Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act requires Enbridge to apply for authorization to occupy state bottomlands and the state to conduct an open public process to evaluate whether these private oil pipelines in the Straits will likely harm the state public waters and bottomlands. Governor Snyder must act as state trustee under this law because this segment of the pipeline rests in state-owned waters. However, he continues to publicly say that this pipeline is primarily a federal regulatory issue. Without obtaining an easement from the state of Michigan in 1953, Enbridge simply could not have built nor could continue to operate these pipelines in state waters. That is why the state retains primary authority over these oil pipelines. Successive state administrations have ignored these Enbridge oil pipelines since 1953. Back when Eisenhower was president, color TV was brand new, and the Detroit Lions were champs. To date, Governor Snyder's response has been to form a task force to study oil pipelines across the state over the next year or so. But the state task force is closed to the public and lacks a sense of urgency. Governor Snyder must take charge now. This is not a partisan issue, but a Great Lakes issue, one that is more pressing than ever because, number one, the state has never determined the likely risks and impacts to not only the Great Lakes water and ecosystem, but also the affected communities in the event of an oil spill or release. Number two, Enbridge recently admitted to violating the 1953 easement by not installing the required anchoring structures every 75 feet along the pipelines. Number three, the state and the public have been in the dark for nearly 6 decades about the lifespan of the pipeline, petroleum products transported, and the risks to our public waters. And number four, the Great Lakes, the Straits of Mackinac are the worst possible place for an oil spill in the Great Lakes, given its unpredictability and complex currents that move volumes of water more than 10 times greater than the flow over Niagara Falls. This is the administration's opportunity to take charge, provide a forum for different voices, engage the public, and protect the Great Lakes. Now I'll turn it over to other concerned citizens, business owners, and community leaders. Thank you.
Next, we're going to turn it to George Goodman. George is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Mackinac Island Community Foundation and a Mackinac Island resident. He will share his and the Foundation's concerns about the direct threat to Mackinac Island and the need for an open public process. And George is joining us by phone.
Thank you. It's our view, certainly here, that a pipeline leak would be a major disaster for all of us who live within the reach of the Great Lakes in the state of Michigan. In my view, it's really simply a matter of risk management. Any organization that has a major risk takes steps to make sure that the risk does no harm. And we as residents of the state deserve that type of response from our governor, our legislature, and even the federal government, if in fact that's what is being foisted off as the reason why the state's not taking action. If the federal government has a responsibility, then I think the governor and the legislature of this state need to also put pressure on them to step up to the plate and do what they are supposed to be doing in this effort. Recently, I think within the past 2 weeks, there was an article in I believe the Detroit Free Press that indicated that the Coast Guard has made a response statement that basically says that we have an inadequate way to find and recover submerged oil. That certainly would also be a significant problem here on the island in the winter months, since I'm sure many of you have seen photos of the large blocks of ice that get pushed up on the shore and make travel to the island by any means other than an airplane very, very difficult. Saying all that, then, if the Coast Guard report is accurate, then the next question, seems to me, remains is what will be the adequate measures that will be put in place to provide safeguards and recovery if there is a leak here. The other observation that I would make is a National Wildlife Federation report indicated that a spill from Line 5 could release up to 1.5 million gallons of oil in just 8 minutes. According to an official from the city of Mackinac Island, the water supply here on Mackinac would be shut down, and there might even be a need to have to evacuate residents. Clearly, the economic vitality of the island will be seriously damaged. We all are aware that there is currently a Pure Michigan campaign that has portrayed Mackinac Island as one of Michigan's hotspots. And certainly we who live here want it to stay that way. A leak would have the potential of devastating Michigan's tourism industry. I would also add that I believe Enbridge owes the public an immediate accounting for the status of the line. And further, I think that clearly the governor should take this matter up as an urgent priority and take whatever steps are necessary to ensure the citizens of Michigan that Enbridge is in fact operating in an open, public manner and is in full compliance with the state's 1953 easement that has been previously referred to.
George,
I think.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to our next speaker if you have any final remarks.
That was my final statement.
Very good. Thank you. We've got one speaker at the mercy of airline schedules. Hopefully we'll get to him a bit later. So next, I believe we're going to move to Wayne Blomberg. Wayne, are you on the line?
Yes.
Wayne is the owner of Ridey Marine, a well-known marina on Crooked Lake in Emmett County. He will explain why keeping oil out of the Great Lakes is crucial to his business. Wayne, go ahead.
Okay. I operate a marina located on northern Michigan's inland route. Having grown up here, I've developed a true appreciation for the beauty and clean air and water that we've been blessed with. Likewise, the business I'm in relies heavily on those very qualities that drive our tourism-based economy. As I learn more about oil pipelines that run near and through our lakes and rivers, I'm having strong reservations about near and long-term safety and reliability of this infrastructure, considering the age. An accident or spill in northern Michigan must never happen. A spill or failure of equipment anywhere on the inland route would have a very detrimental effect on our business. This pipeline is of an age that requires much scrutiny, especially considering any increase in operating pressure. Technological advances over time could make this pipeline safer and should be required. Where the pipeline crosses any water body that has ice cover in winter, double wall piping with monitoring equipment should be mandatory. Any wintertime spill would be impossible to clean up. A community that must live with the risk of failure and spill should have a voice and input in oversight of the operation of these pipelines. As mentioned earlier, I have a deep appreciation for the area I choose to live in. I have been a longtime member at Tip of the Mint Watershed Council, Little Traverse Conservancy, and Pickerel Crooked Lakes Association. Within the past 15 years, I've been involved with 3 projects by Little Traverse Conservancy that raised over $2 million to purchase ecological sensitive properties on the inland route. On the inland route, there are approximately 8 other businesses that employ many people and serve the needs of thousands of people in the summertime that would be severely impacted by the disaster of a pipeline failure. And this must never be allowed to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. That was Wayne Blomberg, owner of Ryde Marine, RYDE, in Emmett County. Next, we're going to turn it to Stephen Breda, who's here in person. He is a Petoskey-based writer and photographer who has paddled his canoe around 4.5 of the 5 Great Lakes. He paddled the south shore of Lake Superior this summer. He will talk about the Great Lakes from a recreational perspective. Okay, I think we're good. We'll go ahead with Stephen Breda.
Hi. I'd long dreamed of one day embarking on a walkabout, and in 2009 I quit my day job and started spending the summer months paddling my canoe around the shorelines of the 5 Great Lakes. In 2009 I made it around Lake Huron, in 2010 Lake Michigan, 2012 Lake Erie, and in 2013 Lake Ontario. This past summer I paddled the U.S. coast of Lake Superior, hoping to paddle the Canadian shore next summer, the Canadian shore of Superior. These voyages have infused me with a reverence for the lakes and a dismay at the way they have been and continue to be abused. For the past century or so, the Great Lakes have been a dump for litter, oil and salt runoff from roadways, effluent from sewer systems, tailings from mining operations, ordnance from mining, from military exercises, mercury deposits from power plants, pesticide and fertilizer runoff from farms and lawns. Nuclear industry is currently pushing a plan to bury a radioactive waste on the Lake Huron shore. I'm here today to add my voice to those concerned about the 61-year-old Enbridge energy pipeline that runs under the Straits of Mackinac. A rupture of that section of pipeline would cause untold damage to the environment and threaten the drinking water and livelihoods of the people of my home. In the first decade of this century, Enbridge's network of pipelines leaked over 130,000 barrels of oil into the environment. That record, combined with the myriad uncertainties of responding to a spill in the Straits, should compel Michigan's government officials to conduct a thorough public review that weighs the benefits versus the risks of the pipeline to the citizens of the state. I've paddled my canoe across the Straits several times. I'm 63 years old, only a couple of years older than Line 5. It could be argued that I too am too old to be crossing those turbulent waters in a small vessel. But if my canoe or I spring a leak, the consequences would be limited to a few tears shed. It wouldn't be an environmental and economic disaster.
Next speaker is Aaron Payment. He is tribal chairman of the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians, and he will speak about the importance of Great Lakes water, the fisheries, and the governor's responsibility.
Ani buju biwapjig and dishnakas mako mcgee's and dodum bawating and donjaba anishinaabe ojibwe odawa otawatami and down. My name is Aaron Payment, and I am the chairperson of the Sioux Tribe. We are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi. I have a unique perspective because I bring with me information and knowledge about the co-management responsibility of the state along with tribes, and also the unique perspective of having worked for the tribe in Battle Creek when the Kalamazoo spill happened. I'm going to talk about that, and then I'll talk about the responsibility. When I worked for the tribe there, the spill happened, and it was devastating. And you know, sometimes over time, we forget about how devastating things and the impact. But the impact was that our team members, our employees of the tribe, work in the area and live in the area, and over 360 people had to be evacuated. The air was toxic for a period of time. And we were promised that the cost of the cleanup would be about $5 million. It's now over $1 billion. It was a relatively contained spill because it was in the Kalamazoo River as opposed to the Great Lakes area, and this is my Michigan map. The ceded territory is from the Chocolate River Marquette down to the Skanaba River, and from Alpena to Ludington. This is the treaty ceded territory that my tribe entered a treaty with the United States government in 1836. 1837, Michigan became a state. As a result of that, we ended up winning lawsuits that provide us the ability to fish in the Great Lakes and then to gather, hunt, and fish in the inland waters. And the responsibility that the state has in co-management with that resource. For the last 30 years, we have very delicately balanced out the environment and the climate for our fish. In our territory alone, our whitefish population has decreased from about 1 million to about 450,000. It's a very delicate balance with the ballast waters and the lack of attention to that issue and the resolution to that issue. We've seen quagga mussels and zooplankton and all of these invasive species, lamprey, come in and affect our fisheries. And so we haven't seen really the responsibility upheld by the state in that issue, and certainly this issue represents a very big threat. Right now, the balance of our fish, both our fish that we fish for subsistence and also for commercial fishing for our tribal fishermen. I'm from a tribal fishing household, but also for the sports fisheries. And so I want to send a word out to all of those people who like to catch walleye. My tribe does stocking of walleye. We stock millions of walleye into the lakes, and all of that is threatened with this bill. If this spill happens, there will not be a way to contain it. It will damage Mackinac Island, and I'm glad the Mackinac Island people are here, and Boblo Island, and then also all the tributaries that feed in and out of that will be damaged, and it's just the irresponsibility that's being exercised by the state and the dereliction on the governor's part to say that we will have a study and to not have the urgency. Our governor is the governor of the center of the Great Lakes. There are the Governor's Council of the Great Lakes in Ontario and tribes that participate. And
please mute your line.
If our state's governor doesn't exercise the leadership and instead punts and panders to the special interests, then we aren't going to see the kind of leadership that we need to see from Wisconsin and Ohio and the Ontario provinces. And so I'm going to use the word dereliction. I think there's a dereliction on the part of our governor. I think we need to lead from the governor's office to ensure that the pipeline is secure. I'm not anti-oil. I think if there's a way to make sure that this is safe, that's what we want to see as Michigan's original residents. Thank you.
Chris Shepler will share his perspective as owner of Shepler's Mackinac Island Ferry, which has been providing passenger transport to Mackinac Island since 1945. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, first I want to echo Aaron's sentiments with regards to being not anti-oil, because obviously with the running of our vessels, we can't be anti-oil. So it's not about being bad, it's just about being stewards, as Aaron has mentioned. I have made comments before stating that water is life, and it's no more complicated and no more simple than that. And if we don't protect those resources in our little place of heaven here in Michigan and the Great Lakes, then I think that would be a travesty. Also, Enbridge does not have the best track record, especially within the state of Michigan. And I think that is what is concerning the majority of people, not only on this call, but a large amount of people within the state are a little anxious about the increase of oil and the change of oil to a much more dense form, and that adds pressure to the pipeline, pressure to the system, and again, with Enbridge's past track record, it's a scary thought. I'm a third generation owner operator of a ferry boat to Mackinac Island, a ferry system to Mackinac Island, and obviously, if that water goes awry, then we lose what we've built over the last 80 years within our company. I'm also born and raised in northern Michigan. I was born and raised in Harbor Springs, and that continues to be my home. So not only from a business perspective, but just from a quality of life perspective, that the Great Lakes are so greatly important, not only to us, but the rest of the world.
Our last speaker, and then we'll turn it over for some questions. Our last speaker is Jim Lively. He's Program Director for the Michigan Land Use Institute, and he's going to talk about the Oil and Water Don't Mix campaign's citizen outreach, accomplishments, and plans for moving forward. Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I appreciate the comments of everybody who was here, especially those that are right in harm's way of the pipeline. I just want to speak for the rest of the campaign and for many of the citizens of Michigan who are also expressing their concern. And I'll start by saying that as a lifelong Michigander myself, who has spent every summer of my life driving across the Mackinac Bridge, when I learned just over a year ago that there was a pipeline in the Straits of Mackinac, I was completely shocked and couldn't understand how we as the citizens of Michigan didn't know about this pipeline. And since then, have been talking to many other folks, including the folks that are here today, asking whether others knew about this. And the fact is, no, it's been a surprise to almost all of us. So in fact, the group, I just tell a little story about how we got to bring this campaign together, and then we'll talk about where we're going. It was a small group of northern Michigan citizens that were involved in a climate campaign, learned about the Keystone XL and the threats to the climate from a pipeline way out west, that came back from a climate rally and learned then, rather surprisingly, from a National Wildlife Federation report, that we have our own pipelines here in Michigan. And the first we heard about them, of course, was 4 years ago when the Kalamazoo River absorbed that 1 million gallons of oil from an Enbridge pipeline. And it was then that we learned about Line 5 and the threat that exists in the Straits of Mackinac. So really beginning just last spring, a coalition or a campaign began to formalize to say we need to get the word out to much more of Michigan that we have this risk right in the waters of the Great Lakes. We reached out to many of the organizations that you see here, led by groups like the Michigan Environmental Council and FLOW, Michigan Land Use Institute, Sierra Club, Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council. These are the groups that came together early last summer and began to develop a campaign to raise awareness. What you'll see that we've done is we've put together a website that is now a place where you can find kind of a consortium or a consolidation of all the information about Line 5, including a video, a TV commercial that we've been running all summer throughout northern Michigan, again, just to raise awareness so that folks understand that there is a pipeline in the waters. We also have a video of an animation of what a spill would look like in the Straits of Mackinac that was done by the University of Michigan. Very informative, and it does show, as Aaron said earlier, how devastating a spill would be to all of the beaches and the communities around the Straits of Mackinac. So we have that video on the website. We also, on the website, these groups, as it was mentioned earlier by Liz, in July we sent a letter to Governor Snyder requesting state leadership and state action, and we've been seeking that action. In fact, that's what brings us here today, is we're, again, asking the governor to take leadership. There is a letter on the website with now more than 2,300 people that have signed on, asking the governor to take some leadership on the issue. We brought our campaign to the Labor Day Bridge Walk. In fact, where Governor Snyder was leading the walk, We had about 60 volunteers there in shirts and hats gathering petitions. I brought the petitions with me here today. We had about 1,300 petitions were signed just that day alone from folks that were, again, learning for the first time as they just walked over the Mackinac Bridge that there were pipelines right there next to them. So our campaign continues to grow. We are gathering signatures. We are gathering organizations and groups. Many of the folks that are here today we've just met since the Labor Day Bridge Walk. This is really a growing campaign as Michigan citizens learn about the risk and understand that we really are pointing at our state's top officials and Governor Snyder to take action. We are building this pressure right now for Governor Snyder, our state's top leader, to enforce the state law and a state easement pertaining to these oil pipelines lying on state land in the state's public trust waters. Clearly, this is a state issue, and we need state leadership. So, the governor's duty and responsibility is equally clear. This is our campaign's commitment to protecting the Great Lakes from a catastrophic oil spill. We intend to continue to grow our campaign and to continue to bring the pressure to our leaders for action. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I think with that, why don't we wrap it up? As I've said, if you have questions, feel free to follow up with me. Andy McGlashan, my information is on the press release and other materials. I'd also point folks to oilandwaterdon'tmix.org. You can find a fact sheet there that has pretty much all the information, the background details on this issue, as well as some video resources and other good information there. So again, feel free to contact me or others in the campaign, and thank you very much for joining the call. We appreciate it.